Hi everyone, my name is Alex Yannicone and I'm the Director of Education and Community Programs at the CU Johnson Depression Center. Today we're going to just take a little bit of time to talk about stress management and self-care. To get the most out of this, it would be helpful to just have a pen and paper or a Word document screen up just to write things down, as we're going to go through some tips and tools to help with both of these areas. So the first thing I want you to do is take a moment and just write down 5 things that are causing you stress in your life right now. So be specific about this, not just COVID or family, but what about those areas are stressful to you, and write those down in a specific way. I mean, this can be a range from work things to family, to the community, whatever it may be. But just take a moment and write down 5 of those things that are causing you stress right now. You'll also see this little chart on here. If you want to, you can create this, as we will kind of be going through this as well. Otherwise, just write them down and I'll work you through those other parts as well. As you're writing down those 5 things, I'm going to move forward, but I'll give you time, or you'll have time to note those, and as more things come up, you can add them as well. So one way that we can think of stress is to think of a cup of water. When somebody asks you to hold a glass of water for a minute, you don't think much of it because it doesn't weigh that much. If somebody asked you to hold that glass of water for a few hours, it'd be a little bit more difficult. And if somebody said you have to hold on to this for 24 hours, it would be nearly impossible. What we know about that is that the weight of the water doesn't change. That stays the same. But the longer that we hold on to it, the heavier it becomes. It's the same way we can think of stress. The longer that we hold on to our stressors, the heavier they become for us. So we have to figure out ways that we can set that glass of water down. We can take a break, take a moment, and really relieve some of those issues or stressors that we have going on. So that's one of our goals of today, is to figure out ways we can set that glass of water down. But we also know that stress actually has a purpose. Stress actually keeps us focused, it motivates us, it makes us creative, better problem solvers. So we do know that some levels of stress are a benefit to us. If we had very little or no stress, we'd actually be pretty bored or inactive. But what we tend to see is that our stress levels keep increasing, and that's where we see our performance start to decline. We get really sick, we get tired, we maybe have outbursts of emotions, and we end up usually burning out or breaking down. So we know that we fluctuate on this bell curve, depending on the day, month, what's going on. But we want to figure out ways that we can kind of stay more in that middle section and not have our stress cause a lot of issues to our performance. Another thing to know about stress is that it really has a purpose. It is there to protect us. And the ways that it does this is it gives us logical warning signs about things that we care about. And this is never in a positive way. It never sends messages that are positive, that everything's great with your family right now, or you're definitely going to get that job promotion. If it came up in that way, we wouldn't really pay attention to it. So our stressors usually come up in a very doom or gloom message. Your things with your family are a mess right now, or you're definitely not going to get that job promotion. So it comes up in these negative ways so that we pay attention to it and do something about it. And so we have to figure out ways to respond to those stressors when we hear them come up. And so that's what we're going to go through now. We are going to figure out ways that we can relieve some of our stressors. The first step to this is actually very simple, and yet something we don't tend to do. And it's really just listening to what our stressor is telling us. So usually when we have stress come up, we try to push it away, tune it out, try to work on other things or do other things around us. The problem with that is that it becomes louder, it becomes more of an issue, and we're not taking care of that stressor. So the first thing we want to do is recognize what is stressing me out, why is it stressing me out, so then we can actually do something about it. So a very simple thing to do, but again, something we don't tend to do. So when we look at some of these practice ones, I'm juggling work and family. So the message behind that could be, I really want to succeed at work, yet I'm having to work from home and I'm really, stressed out or worried about how to have that balance between both. The second one here, I'm fighting with my partner. The message behind that could be, I really care about this relationship. I want it to work. I want things to have us resolve the issues that we're going through. On the other side, it could be, maybe I'm questioning, is this the relationship I should be in? Or is this the situation I want to be in right now? And then the third one here, I'm nervous for my performance review, could be, I really want that job promotion, or I really want to prove to my leadership team that I deserve to be where I'm at. So again, simple. Usually there's a message of why you care, why this is stressing you out, and we want to listen to what that is. So just take one of yours and you can say it out loud, or write it down, or just kind of think of it to yourself of what is the message behind that stressor? Why is this important to you? Why is it something that you're holding on to? The second piece here that we want to do, once we listen to our stressor, is then to do something about it. So I know this can oversimplify life, and it's not always this easy, but we can usually put our stressors into one of these three categories. We tend to have fixable, unfixable, or overreactions, or a mix of these. It can kind of fall into a few of these at times. So fixable stressors are things that we can actually do something about. These are things we have control over. So this could be something like my check engine light's on and I need to take it in. It's been stressing me out. That's something I can do something about. I can take my car in, I can get it fixed. So things that you have that control over. Unfixable, on the other hand, are things that we don't necessarily have the control over. So my kid's tuition has gone up. That's a huge stressor, yet I can't change that their tuition has increased. And then overreactions tend to be things that are a little too far in the future, or things that really just shouldn't be weighing us down right now, shouldn't be things that we're holding on to in the moment. So with overreactions, usually we want to challenge them of why is this happening to me? So when we look at these ones, these practice ones, when we look at a new policy at work, so maybe it's a policy that doesn't align with your beliefs or your work ethic, that can be an unfixable, right? We can't change those policies. We are going to have to deal with that stress that's coming with that. Where will I be in the next 2 years? That one's an overreaction. If that's something that's really weighing you down right now and really stressing you out, it's something we should think about, yet it's not something that should be overwhelming us right now. So that would be an overreaction. And then our third one, I have a work project due by the end of the week. That's fixable. That's something that you can take care of. You have the ability to take action on. So take a moment and I want you to bucket each of your stressors. So either say it's fixable, unfixable, or overreaction. And with each of those, again, it can be a mix and it's really up to you onto what it falls into. So just a few tools that we can utilize to help with this. Once we actually recognize where it goes into, we'll talk about each of these individually. So fixable, usually we want to just have an action plan. We want to do something to get it off our list. So a few things to note, usually with our fixables, it can be something that is pretty simple, but we've never done it before, or it seems a little overwhelming to us. So that can be helpful to get help from the outside. So one of my stressors for a long time was finding childcare. I had never had to find it before. I didn't even know where to start. And so recognizing that I have neighbors, I have family that have kids, I have a community around me who has dealt with this, I can ask questions, I can seek out support from them to get that help from the outside to figure out where my starting point is. Along with that, it's important to plan and organize around this. So instead of just saying, oh, on Friday, I'm going to figure out childcare, which is pretty unrealistic, it can be helpful to break it down to be able to address it step by step and set that time and organization to actually do it. So first step is figuring out what kind of childcare I want. How much can I afford in childcare? And that narrows things down to then I can address those next steps. So planning and organization can be a helpful way to then address whatever fixable ones you have. A last piece to this is accountability. So we tend to say, I'll just hold myself accountable, I'll do this, but we're also really good at talking ourselves out of things. So it's important to have others that can hold us accountable as well. So, my colleague is going to check in on me before my project's due to see how I'm doing or where I'm at. Or my family member is going to check in. So letting other people know what you're doing, how they can help hold you accountable so that it motivates us to actually get things done. The second one here is unfixable. So again, if you have ones that fall into this, a lot of times we can't change the outcome of what's happening. So this is really where self-care comes into action, of really the importance of it. You may be dealing with a lot of emotions or a lot of things going on, and it's important we address that to best take care of ourselves, because we can't necessarily change the outcome that's happening. So whether it's, I go on walks, I eat well, I have people I can talk to, all of those things are important to help deal with whatever that unfixable is. But another piece of this that can be helpful is what we call an advocacy plan. And what's useful about this is this lets people know in our lives what we're dealing with and how they can help us. So no matter what your unfixable is, it is important to have people or a person to be able to support you during that time. Doing it on your own can be really overwhelming. So with this, we can use this really simple conversation to talk about it. A lot of times we just assume people know what we need or what we should be doing, or what they should be doing to help us. And that obviously creates even more tension, because sometimes it doesn't work out the way we think that it should. So a really quick example here that we can use this with is, let's say I have a sick parent and I'm talking to my partner about how this is affecting me. So I could say something, hey, I'm dealing with my mom being sick. How this is showing up in my life is when I'm done with work at the end of the day, I just need, a few minutes because I feel really stressed out and the kids and everything going on around me overwhelms me. So how you can support me is, take the kids on a walk and give me 15, 20 minutes just to be by myself. So we're letting them know the issue we're dealing with, what it looks like for us, and how that person can support them. For a lot of us, things show up that we're, irritable, or we're exhausted, or, we lash out, whatever it may be. So letting them know what they can do to support us. Some people, it's like, I just need somebody to talk to. For others, it's leave me alone. So figuring out what that is can be really important. And then our last one is overreactions. So these are those stressors that may be too far in the future, things that we really don't need to be stressing about too much in this moment. So we want to challenge it. We want to give it perspective. The first thing here is we can rate it. So on a scale from 1 to 10, life or death, where does this fall? When we look at it in that sense, again, it can give us perspective of this isn't that big of a deal. So I want to own a house in the next 5 years. Yeah, that can be stressful, but that's, pretty low on the scale from 1 to 10. So maybe I need to take a step back and really allowing this to overwhelm me. We can also be on the lookout. So we know when things typically are more stressful in our lives. We know when the beginning of school is. We know when holidays are. We know when our workload increases. So plan ahead for that. So instead of when Thanksgiving and the holidays show up, being like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed, there's things we can do to prepare in October or early November to really make it so that those aren't so stressful in the moment. We also know that sometimes there's things that are worth being stressed out about. It may be our mission in life. So if you want to own your own business one day, or you want to be, an entrepreneur of some sort, and that's something that is a really strong goal of yours, sometimes we can say, there's a lot of stress that goes with that, but I'm okay with it. This is a goal, it's a passion of mine, and I'm going to deal with the stress that goes along with that. On a smaller scale, this can be little things, like I get really stressed out about flying. And I know that I'm still going to deal with the stress that happens every time I get on a flight, so I can see people, I can enjoy different places. So I just kind of deal with that stress, get through it, so that I can do things that I want to. And then A through Z is also very important. So if we are stressed out about buying a house in the next 5 years, there's a lot of steps that have to happen before you get those keys in your hand. So, what kind of house can I afford? What do I qualify for? What neighborhood do I want to be in? So checking off those those steps that need to happen first are really important before we jump to actually owning that home. So again, just a few of those tools that we can use to address those stressors. The next thing that can be helpful is to order your to-do list. So a big excuse we have around stress is I have too many stressors, too little time. Although there are situations that's absolutely the fact, that's exactly what's going on, most times it comes down to our time management. And so we can help with this by looking at what is a priority and what is a deadline. So high priority are things that are important to you, things that you value that need to get done. And deadline is actually when something is due. So the higher the priority, the higher the deadline. Those are things we want to be working on first and then work our way down. Deadline's going to come first and then priority and go from there. So with a work project that has a high priority, that's important, it needs to get done, it also has a quick deadline. So that's something I need to work on first. With childcare, the priority is high, deadline's a little bit lower because I have family that can help, I have other things that can go on, but it still needs to get done. That's the second thing. And then working out, that deadline's pretty low, priority's pretty low, so that's something that comes later. So working, with the most important, quickest due first and then going backwards helps with our time management. So with your stressors, what I want you to do is rate the priority. So how high of a priority, 10 being highest, how important is it to you? And then deadline, where does it fall on deadline? And then that can allow you to look at those stressors and then do something about them. So take a moment to do that real quickly. As you're doing that, just a few other things to think about is how can we be proactive in our stressors? So we tend to be very reactive with stressors. So way we can do this is look at the 6 areas that we may have stress. And this just shows some of the things that can fall into them. And be a little bit more ahead of the game in these. So with some of these, we may say, I haven't talked to my dad in a while, or, I need to check up on my savings account. Or, I need to, exercise 1 more day a week. So they're not weighing us down right now, but they're things that if we leave them, they can creep up and cause greater stressors. So the helpful way we can use this tool is to have this wheel, check in, kind of go through each of these, jot down a few things, and then come back to it in a week, in a month, in a couple months. Are these things still on there? Are they becoming heavier? Are they becoming bigger? So then we have the ability to address them, do something about it. So again, being proactive can help so that our stressors don't pile on. We're gonna kind of switch over to self-care now. Obviously, they kind of go hand in hand. If we have stress, we know that self-care can be a really important tool that we need to utilize. So we'll talk about what we can do with self-care now. So self-care has a 1,000 different definitions, but in the most simplest form, it is the intentional action to take care of yourself. We're going to talk about self-care in these 6 different categories. There's a lot of overlap in these, and ideally we have a well-rounded self-care plan that touches on each of these in one way or another. So physical self-care is exactly what you think of taking care of your body. So these are the typical self-care habits you think of: eating well, sleeping, exercise, drinking water, all those things that we tend to think of when we talk about self-care. Psychological self-care is the same, but it's taking care of our minds, our brains. So what are things we can do there? Do we have a non-work hobby? Do we have people we can talk to? Do we have activities that we enjoy, or books or journaling that we like to engage with? Ways that we can let our brains take a break the same way we need to let our bodies. Emotional self-care, and a lot of people think psychological and emotional kind of go together, and in some ways they do, but emotional is more about our feelings. How do we address feelings that come up when they come up? So we tend to push down emotions that come up, that it's not appropriate for me to cry right now or be angry. So we have to find ways to express that in different ways. So if I'm angry, what are ways that I can express my anger in a productive way? If I'm sad, how can I allow myself to cry? Can I put on a sad movie and allow myself to let that go. Or if I'm happy, how do I find ways to express my joy in what's going on? So finding ways we can express those emotions when and if we need to. Spiritual self-care is really about finding the meaning in life. So for everybody, this is going to be very different. For some, that may be going to church every Sunday, even if it's virtual. For others, it's getting out in nature and appreciating the things around them. So really recognizing what is the meaning in life to me and how can I find ways to identify that. And then relationship self-care are prioritizing those meaningful relationships in your life. So what relationships do I care about? How can I engage with those people? How can I check in on them or have those meaningful time and space for them? And then also looking at, am I putting a lot of energy into toxic relationships? And if I am, how can I shift that energy to those people that mean more to me? And then workplace. We spend a lot of time at work, and whether it's behind a computer now or in the office, we know this is where a lot of our energy goes. So we want to enjoy it while we're doing it. So taking care of ourselves in the workplace is important. So having colleagues that we enjoy being around, taking lunch breaks, taking breaks, walking around, having a comfortable arrangement around your workspace, setting boundaries, all of those different things can really help with our self-care. So we want to find, again, a well-rounded plan that we can really be able to touch on each of these areas. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but we do know there's a lot of benefits when we do engage in self-care. We know that in our personal life, people tend to be overall healthier. They end up having more energy. They tend to be better problem solvers and more creative. They also look at their relationships in a more positive light. They also just feel better about who they are, what they're doing, and what the future holds. In the workplace, when we see that people engage in self-care, we see that people aren't as absent as often, probably because they are healthier. There's not as much staff turnover because stress is probably lower. We see a lower healthcare costs, again, people's health. We actually see that employees note that they're happier. They enjoy the work that they're doing and the environment that they're in. And I think one of the most important pieces here is that we actually see an increase in productivity, even during stressful times. So that excuse of, I don't have time for self-care, or this isn't something that I can do right now, we actually see that as a detriment to our stressors and our ability to handle our workload. So when things are stressful, when we have that good work-life balance, we have the ability to handle it in a more productive way. So what I want you to do is real quickly just think of a time that you have ever felt really stressed out or burnt out. So you felt overwhelmed by all the things kind of going on in your life. What were some of your warning signs? What did that look like for you? During that time, what did you do well and what didn't you do well? So the purpose of doing this is to really recognize, what does it look like when I am really overwhelmed or stressed or burnt out? For me, I talk really negatively. I talk negative about the work I'm doing, how I'm feeling. I can't really talk about anything positive, even if I'm enjoying the work or like what I'm doing. So that's my biggest warning sign, is I check in with myself. If somebody says, how's work? And all I can bring up is the negative, that's a time I need to step back and recognize I need to increase my self-care. I need to pay more attention to my self-care. So recognizing how it shows up for you allows us to then take action so that we can engage in more self-care to handle those stressful times better. It's also important to recognize that when you are stressed out, you do still do things well. You may still get your work done. You may still be able to have, really meaningful relationships. But it's also important to check in, what am I slipping on? What am I not doing well? So that, again, we can recognize what we can do, get ahead of it, and not go down this really slippery slope. So recognizing when you felt this way, what did it look like for you? So then when we have that happen again, or we see that kind of building up again, that we can tune more into our self-care. So what we're going to do now is go through a few little assessment things to help you really recognize where you are in your self-care now. So even if you're still working on the reflection piece, recognize that we're going to go through another area here to really recognize where are you in your self-care and how can we have some ideas moving forward to help manage our self-care habits a little bit better. So this is an assessment I want you all to actually do. So take a moment. I'm going to give a few moments for you to do this. You can also pause and do these on your own. But this breaks it down into the 6 categories we were just talking about. I want you to rate yourself in each of these areas as if you are doing well, like very good. I do this okay, or I rarely do this, or I never do this. So a 3 is that I do this well. 2 is I do this okay. 1 is rarely, and 0 is never. Don't overthink this. Make sure that when you're filling this out that you're really being true to how you are in your self-care currently, not how you would like to be. And just take a moment to recognize each of these areas and how you're doing. When you're finished, what I want you to do is to recognize the area you feel like you're doing the best and the area you feel like you could use the most improvement. So again, I'm going to give just a couple minutes to do this, and then I'm going to talk about each of these in just a little bit of detail. All right, so you can keep working on this as you're doing it. I'm going to briefly go through each of these. One thing I want to note is the purpose of this is not to really highlight where you're not doing well or where you need, the most improvement. A lot of you already know what that looks like, but really also to recognize where you're doing well and really the importance of continuing to do that. So physical self-care, obviously, again, is kind of those easy ones that we think about with self-care. So finding ways that we can eat healthy, finding ways that we can get exercise in. I've had a lot of people say they set an alarm to go to sleep, so helping with their sleep. So just figuring out ways, having people to hold you accountable with eating well, so cooking with others or making meals for others. So having that accountability can be helpful with our physical self-care. Psychological self-care is also really important. So taking care of your brains. We have, people mentioning, they journal or they read books or they garden, or they, sometimes just get on TV and watch a Netflix show and binge watch it, and that can be helpful. It can also be helpful to spend time away from devices. So being really intentional in that and what that looks like. And one of my favorite ones that I heard in this one was, if it's not a hell yes, I'm not going to do it. And I think that's important. We're not talking about work. We're talking about other things that we pile on outside. So volunteering or helping out with things or doing things that end up causing us more stress. So unless we're passionate about it, unless we care about it, we can say no to extra responsibilities and then really engage in those ones that we care about. Emotional self-care is, again, thinking of ways to take care of our emotions. So we've had people, say they write down affirmations or they have an affirmation book that they look at every day. We know that rereading or rewatching movies tends to be a nice little habit to bring out emotions for other people. And even as simple as identifying objects or things in your life that bring you comfort. So maybe it's the smell of a candle in your house or a blanket or a chair, but recognizing what that is and seeking that out when you need it. And also allowing yourself to express your anger or your outrage in one way or another. So taking action on that. And we're seeing a lot of people doing that these days as well. With spiritual self-care, this is really, again, recognizing what the meaning in life is for you. So we have people talk about grateful jars where they put notes of things they're grateful for every day into a jar. And then at the end of the year, they look and see what there is there or what they've really found important throughout life. Other people, may have a community that they engage with, attending church, once a week. So recognizing what that is. And in Colorado, a lot of people tend to like to get out into the mountains and find their spiritual self-care out there. So really, again, recognizing what that looks like for you and how you can seek that out. And then relationship self-care, this can go on the back burner a lot. So, and it looks a little different with COVID because we may not be able to spend as much time, but we're seeing people get creative here as well. I've seen people talk about being secret chefs where they make a dinner for a group of people and they drop it off at their front porch and then they all get on Zoom and try to guess who the chef was of the day. So that's a fun way to engage. We're seeing, games and puzzles being done virtually, dance parties being done virtually. So a lot of different ways that we can engage with people, even if we can't see them in person. And really recognizing how important that is, not only for us, but for that other individual as well. And then with workplace, it's important that we are doing things to take care of ourselves. So with COVID, I know this has been really hard because those kind of, chats that you would have in the lunchroom aren't happening. When we get on Zoom, we talk about work and then we're off. So checking in with each other. We've seen people do parking lot lunches with each other. So they meet in a parking lot with their coworkers and have lunch on the back of their cars or in a park with social distancing. So still being able to engage in those relationships that we care about at work, but it looks a little different. Boundaries is also important. We've had people say, I make sure I have breakfast with my family first and then I start checking my emails. Or, after 7 o'clock at night, I, have an out of office where I just do not return emails or calls. So really recognizing what this can look like and how important it is to you. And then because a lot of us are behind screens right now, how do we make that area around us comfortable or in a setting that's we're able to work in? So those are just a few examples, but what I'd like you to do is, again, you're going to recognize where you're doing well, really recognize how can I keep doing that? And then what I want you to do is recognize the area you need improvement and make a plan for one thing you would like to start doing. So that's our next piece here is, what am I doing well? How can I keep doing that? Then really think, what would I like to start doing? And we want you to be really realistic in this. So, I'm not going to say I'm going to start running every day if I've never run before. I'm going to fail at that. But maybe I can start trying to do a 20-minute run once a week. So start small, and then we can build on it later. Identifying obstacles can be really important because there may be things that we say, yeah, that works now, but winter comes. What do I do then? And then solutions. How can I overcome that? So maybe I do an app for an indoor exercise. So a really easy one that I started doing when I first did this is I didn't want to be on my phone at night. So I decided I was going to plug it into a different room because my obstacle was that my phone was always right next to me. So by plugging it into a different room, I found that one, I wasn't on my phone before bed. So I was sleeping better. I was reading more. I was having conversations with my partner. So really allowing us to make those really small changes that can have a big impact. So recognizing what that could be for you and what you would like to start doing. This also should not be an added chore. It should be something you want to do. And really just recognizing that when it comes to self-care, it's really not about self-indulgence. It is about self-preservation. It does help with our stress. And it's a necessity for both of us, for both professional and our personal lives. Thank you so much for joining and hope you were able to take something out of our stress management and self-care workshop today.